pleasure to be with you all, and I'm so excited to be here. And I'm going to be talking about multimodality imaging in heart failure. So, now the patients waiting for non invasive cardiac imaging is really a large number. And the role of imaging in heart failure is to confirm the diagnosis, establish the etiology, then assess the severity, guide the management, and prognosticate these patients. There is no doubt that echo has been the winner, and the echo train has really stood the test of time. So, what does cardiac MR really have to offer? The ESC guidelines, all the way from 2012, recommended CMR in selected patients where we were talking about cardiac structure, function, tissue characterization whenever echo was inconclusive. How does cardiac MR benefit? So, the classic cardiac axis is how we acquire the study. We get the vertical long axis, the horizontal long axis, and the short axis views. The fourth chamber gives us a very good impression of the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, left ventricle, the mitral valve, the tricuspid valve. The short axis gives us an idea of function, wall thickness, and wall motion. Then we have the three chamber and the LVOT views. We have the RV inlet and outlet views, and then flow quantification is possible from the aorta and the pulmonary artery to arrive at the QPQS where necessary. The hallmark of CMR is in myocardial tissue characterization, where we're looking at edema and inflammation, particularly in the acute coronary syndromes, where we're looking at either acute MI or myocarditis. The first pass myocardial perfusion evaluates the contrast bolus as it passes from the RV into the LV and then through the myocardium with a very high spatial resolution. The dynamic first pass is done at three levels, the basal, mid-ventricular, and the apical level, and quantification of myocardial blood flow can be done. Late gadolinium enhancement particularly helps in scar detection, and this is the white areas that you see here. These are all the localization, extent, and transmurality of these scars can be very well evaluated. So, CMR provides a very comprehensive and powerful tool for evaluation of cardiac morphology, volumetrics, wall evaluation, myocardial enhancements, area at risk, scar assessment. And so, in heart failure, CMR is actually the third empire. I know both our countries love cricket. So, how does CMR help to establish the etiology in heart failure? Well, we have ischemic versus non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, which is the primary important structure that we look at. So, based on the localization of the late gad enhancement, we can differentiate the two. Ischemic scars are usually following a coronary artery territory, as you can see here in the LAD territory, and are subendocardial in location, whereas the non-ischemic scars do not follow a coronary artery territory, and they often spare the subendocardium and are mid-wall to subepicardial. Here you can see the ischemic heart disease with a scar which is subendocardial in the LAD territory. In a case of dilated cardiomyopathy, the mid-wall fibrosis is what we are looking at because this indicates the non-ischemic cardiomyopathy and is associated with a much worse prognosis. So CMR is the gatekeeper for the coronary angiography to separate the ischemic from the non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. This is a patient who presented as VT, and there was a focal nodular punctate enhancing lesion on the RV aspect of the septum on late GAD enhancement. Now, what you can see is that this is not subendocardial in location. It's not in the coronary distribution. It's mid-wall on the RV aspect of the septum. You can see the corresponding impression on the SPECT, and you can see how CMR has a much superior spatial resolution than SPECT. The differential in these cases is often sarcoid versus TB in our country, and a transbronchial biopsy was done, and this turned out to be sarcoid. This is another 13-year-old who presented with diffuse myocardial edema, and this was, in fact, multiple granulomas were seen on the post-contrast enhancement images, and this turned out to be tuberculosis on biopsy. Going on to things like ARVC, we know the revised task force criteria are looking at regional akinesia or dyskinesia, with then diastolic volumes and then the ejection fractions being low. What happens is that on echo, sometimes you do see the dilated RV with suspicious outpouching, but one cannot be too sure. But with CMR, you can see how well we can appreciate the regional wall motion abnormality of the RV with an increase in the end diastolic volume and the ejection fraction, which is reduced. The RV dilatation, dysfunction, regional contraction abnormalities, and localized aneurysms can be very well seen here. This is a 60-year-old who presented with shortness of breath. On echo, there were biatrial masses with concentric LV hypertrophy. When the patient he was asked to do a CMR because they wanted to check what was the cause of the biatrial masses. And on the CMR, what we can see is the decreased cardiac function with a thickened myocardium together with the thrombi within the right atrium and the left atrium. And this was the classic appearance of a myeloid. In a myeloid, CMR is particularly useful because we have very high sensitivity and specificity to look at this very clear circumferential enhancement that we see in these patients. This is a patient non-compaction, and you can see the thick, spongy, hypocontractile myocardium with deep intertrabecular recesses, and sometimes thrombi can be seen within them. So this is how we can actually tell the etiology of the cardiomyopathy. CMR also helps in valvular assessments. This was a patient of aortic stenosis, and you can see that thin jet of blood as it passes through. Then you have a patient of valvular regurgitation, and again you can see very clearly how well we can appreciate the aortic valve. CMR is also useful in pericardial diseases such as constrictive pericarditis, where you can see the thick enhancing rim of pericardium and the constriction at the AV level. This is a patient of tubercular pericarditis with an exudative effusive pericarditis. And so, in order to establish the etiology of heart failure, CMR has been given a very high rank. Going on to the assessment of the severity of heart failure. What's important is what is the ventricular volumetrics looking like, and CMR is the gold standard. In the evaluation of LV and RV function, CMR is more accurate, reliable, and reproducible, and the coefficient of variation, whereas for echo it is 11.5%, for CMR it's only 3.7%. How does CMR guide management in heart failure? It's found that there is a completely new diagnosis not suspected before, found in 16% patients. There is a change in medication, almost 23%, with intervention or surgery in 8%. So the impact on patient management post-CMR in heart failure is almost 62%. How does CMR prognosticate in heart failure? Well, in ischemic heart disease, the critical questions are function, perfusion, and viability, which are the basis of risk management and prognostication. So when we look at CMR, we've already said that it is the gold standard for ventricular volumetrics. The next is perfusion. Well, this is because ischemia-guided revascularization improves event-free survival over medical therapy. And the first pass CMR helps to look at myocardial perfusion in a very accurate manner for detection, localization, and quantification of the perfusion defect. You can see the perfusion defect in the LAD territory in this patient. Perfusion can be done both at stress and rest, and a defect at stress not seen at rest indicates inducible ischemia. Here you can see the stress and rest perfusion. I can see how there is persistence of the perfusion defect, and this indicates that it's a scar. In the detection of ischemia, CMR is superior to SPECT and perfusion echo. And in fact, CMR and PET have a very good correlation. And in the ischemic cascade, in order to separate viability between viable and non-viable myocardium, again, CMR comes into play. This is because the success of revascularization is based on viability. The basis of viability testing on CMR is dependent on the myocardial segments of wall thinning, the wall motion abnormality, together with scar assessment and contractile reserve. Here you can see that there is wall thinning less than 5.5 millimeters with wall motion abnormality. And you can also assess the transmurality of the scar. Late GAD enhancement is highly specific for irreversibly injured myocardium, and it helps as a reliable prognostic marker with an inverse relationship between the transmurality and the improved contractility. So if the late GAD enhancement is more than 75% transmurality, then it has only a 2% chance of recovery. Whereas if it is much lower, and if the late GAD enhancement is only less than 25% of wall thickness, the chance of recovery of contractile function is much higher. Here you can see that the LGE is more than 75% and suggests that the segment is unlikely to recover. Here is a patient who presented with chest pain and dyspnea on exertion. On echo, the LV dysfunction was seen with regional wall thinning with wall motion abnormality. The CMR, in fact, was also very similar in its appearance. If you look at the short axis in the Plaques view, it is seen that the scar, which is seen in the Plaques view on echo, is very clearly seen. And so you think, what incremental value could CMR really bring to this patient? Well, the additional value that CMR brings is that you can assess the myocardial edema on T2 weighted imaging, which gives you an idea of whether this is acute or subacute. You can see the perfusion defect very clearly, and you can actually quantify the scar. Once you have quantification of the scar, this truly helps to guide therapy. On comparison of the spatial resolution of CMR, SPECT, and PET, spatial resolution of MR is superior to both SPECT and PET. In fact, in a comparative multimodality data on viability assessment based on sensitivity and negative predictive value, the delayed enhanced CMR, PET, thallium, technetium, and dobutamine stress echo, CMR and PET are really close at 95 and 92, with CMR having an edge. So when we're looking at sensitivity and negative predictive value, we're looking at CMR and PET. But when we're looking at specificity and positive predictive value, here dobutamine stress echo is particularly important. But still, the low-dose dobutamine CMR has an edge over the dobutamine stress echo because the number of non-accessible segments are much fewer with CMR. And so for delayed enhancement, we have the highest negative predictive value, but for low dose dobutamine CMR, we have the highest positive predictive value. Going on to complications in heart failure, CMR also has the capability to look at various other complications which we sometimes encounter. Here you can see a large LV aneurysm with an apical thrombus. You can see the infarcted thin myocardium, which is white and enhancing with wall motion abnormality. This is a patient who had an LV pseudoaneurysm at the basal interventricular septum, a very narrow neck and intracavitary thrombi, all very well depicted on CMR. A patient with an LV thrombus. Why this is important is that sometimes when we're doing the echo, we can confuse it as a reverberation artifact. But with CMR, we very clearly see the filling defect. Small thrombi can be missed on echo but are very well seen on CMR. In the detection of LV thrombus, CMR is superior to both non-contrast and contrast echo. So CMR versus other modalities shows that CMR has promise in function, infarction, thrombus, MVO, hemorrhage, area at risk, and all this is without any radiation. Multiple studies have been done on the prognostic role of late GAD enhancement. Going to the non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, this is a patient who presented with VT. Again, we can see the wall motion abnormality, but what MR does is it shows the myocardial tissue characterization. There's an acute myocardial edema on the RV aspect of the septum, together with a scar on late GAD enhancement, which was the cause of the VT, and then helps to guide therapy and ablation. Again, a patient with global hypokinesia. On CMR, again, we see the global hypokinesia, but what CMR does in addition is it shows us on T2 weighted imaging the presence of myocardial edema with perfusion showing no defect, and then you have the subepicardial scars, and these are patients who have a very high chance of being TB versus sarcoid. Lymph nodes were seen within the mediastinum, which were then biopsied, and it turned out to be sarcoid. In DCM, the presence of late GAD enhancement is particularly useful to assess death, heart failure, and sudden cardiac death, and also it guides event-free survival and freedom from device therapy. In sarcoidosis, CMR, in the prediction of SCD, there's a higher rate of cardiac events in patients with cardiac sarcoidosis on CMR, with a lower rate of SCD in cardiac patients who have an ICD rather than those who do not have. So the absence of late GAD enhancement is associated with increased survival free from aborted SCD and ICD shocks. Going on to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, CMR is extremely accurate in wall thickness assessment. Not only that, it also helps to guide where exactly is the hypertrophy and certain echo segments which the echo cannot evaluate. So here you can see the mid-cavity to apical hypertrophy. There's wall thickness of more than 3 centimeters, which is an independent risk predictor needing ICD. Here you can also see that these patients not infrequently have scars. The scar and fibrosis is very well detected on CMR. And not only that, we can also quantify these scars. These scars are very often seen in the junctional regions of the septum, and these then can be quantified. And once we have the delineation quantification, these then have a prognostic significance in these patients where the presence of late GAD enhancement shows a trend towards predicting SCD events. Myocardial scars in HCM are related to ventricular arrhythmia, sudden cardiac death, and all-cause mortality. So presence rather than extent of late GAD enhancement is predictive of arrhythmias. So myocardial fibrosis predicts appropriate device therapy, and we also can risk stratify these patients where there's no late GAD enhancement indicates that they're at the lowest level of risk, whereas if it is higher, then they go to, if the late GAD enhancement is more than 15%, then they go to the highest level of risk and then ICDs need to be put. Besides that, in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, if you have obstructive cardiomyopathy, you can very well evaluate the mitral valve for evidence of LVOT turbulence. You can see the SAM and the LVOT gradient, and which can be all measured on MRI. So recent advances in CMR have been multiparametric mapping, where without any contrast, we can evaluate the pathophysiology and disease processes based on T1 ECV-based mapping. We also have T1, T2, T2 star, and ECV maps in healthy subjects and myocardial disease. And then depending on the numbers, even without contrast, we have a very good assessment of what's happening within the heart. Last but not the least is management. CMR prior to radiofrequency ablation, we know that EP is time-consuming with long fluoroscopy times. It's associated with reducing VT with limited coverage, which may miss lesions. The advantage MR has is once we have the scar parameters, its transmurality and relative scar intensity, we can then use it for prediction of successful ablation sites and reduction of procedure and fluoroscopy times. So in the algorithm for heart failure, needless to say, we start with echo, where we're looking at the valves, the segmental LV dysfunction, diffuse LV dysfunction, RV dysfunction of pericardium. But after that, at the second level, not infrequently, CMR comes forward. So in summary, I'd like to say that CMR is an extremely robust non-invasive diagnostic tool with a very high sensitivity, spatial resolution, high accuracy, high reproducibility, with low operator dependence and no radiation. And in order to confirm the diagnosis, establish etiology, assess the severity, guide management, prognostic, and follow up these patients, CMR is very often your third umpire, and it actually is the crystal ball that tells you what's happening inside. So when we're imaging for heart failure and you're spoiled for choice, then you're always looking for CMR to be the third umpire. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Professor Mona. If there are any questions from Professor Mona Bhatia, please come to the mic and ask a question. Any comments from the panelists?
Excellent talk. It's very comprehensive, and there is definitely a role, an emerging role of CMR in patients with heart failure, not only in the diagnosis but also in the prognosis and as well as in the management. Thank you.
For being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mona, about excellent presentation. I would like to ask how often you are doing CMR in management of cardiovascular diseases in your setup.
Actually, we do a lot of cardiac MR. We are probably one of the special, we are a very big cardiac hospital and we do a lot of cardiac MR. One of the important places that we do it is to check for myocarditis. So little children come who are, sometimes even less than 1 year old who suddenly have DCM. The ejection fraction is less than 15%, and it's just because of viral myocarditis. And even before we can get all the bloods and get an assessment and check, IgG can be given to these patients if we know that it's myocarditis. So these patients have an urgent CMR in our hospital. Besides that, we have a lot of patients where viability is assessed and also the cause. And another place where I think a lot of cardiologists like to have it is prior to EP, because that way it really saves them a lot of time if we have an assessment of where exactly is the scar, the size of the scar, and what will be the results if all that can be documented before it.
So for children, do you give the GA to them because 1 or 2 years old can't hold the breath?
Yes. Then they would be under GA. But there's a lot of children who come with myocarditis, and it's quite unfortunate because if these patients can be given IgG at an early stage, then we really save the heart. Because we've had from the past, there are so many children who have now got a cardiomyopathy or a dilated cardiomyopathy, which is completely non-treatable at this point, and they're just waiting for heart transplants. So it's very important if we can actually save the heart, especially since we have so many infections in our country.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatia, for your wonderful talk. Since this was about multimodality imaging, what are your views about the use of multiple modalities in different patients? You will prefer to use one technology for one patient or use multiple technologies in the same patient for the management, diagnosis and management?
I think multiple modalities is very important. First of all, no cardiac MR can replace the echo because the total number of echoes that are done in any hospital is huge. So it's almost having a whole auditorium full of people. So it's the number of echoes is much larger. But what happens is that at a second step, there's a lot of patients who also need a CT because not infrequently you want to check the coronaries, and we still haven't reached the level where we can assess the coronaries very well on the CMR. So there is a lot of patients who come for not only are we looking at evaluating CTs for coronary artery disease, but we're not now looking at stenosis. The game has changed to plaque imaging. Our intent is now to do a preventive healthcare checkup or to early detect plaques. And that can only be done with the coronary CT. It cannot even be done with the CAG, because I think it's not, the intention is not to look at stenosis. If we have to get our populations to become much more healthy, then we must pick the plaque much earlier. We don't have to wait for calcium score because that also happens only after the age of 50. We want to look at very early plaque so that these patients can be prevented. Because see, a lot of patients who are coming to us already have family histories, or they have various lifestyle changes, sedentary life, lipids, different our lifestyles are so different. So it's very important to detect this at a very early stage for us. So our intention is really to do the coronary CT to have early detection and prevention of coronary artery disease for the future and amongst the youngsters. The stress is so high in today's world. So
do you use PET imaging also?
Yes, we do PET imaging also. And PET we do if like sarcoid and all, we want to look at activity. But what I find is that if you're doing an MR and if you do the diffusion weighted imaging, you get a fairly good assessment of activity, and so you don't sometimes need to do the PET. But there are situations where you want to see which, if there are multiple lesions, you want to see which is active, which is not active. And the other problem is that if you're doing repeated PETs, you're doing giving radiation, whereas with CMR you're not. So the same situation in aortoarteritis also, where you're looking for whether there is any activity. And then again, CMR is useful because if you do the diffusion weighted imaging, you get a very good idea of where there's activity, and you don't necessarily need to put them under radiation and give them the contrast.
Dr. Mona, thank you very much for a very good talk. I have two questions. One is that in patients with, how often in patients with heart failure would you perform a CMR? Number one. And number two, what are your views about calcium score?
Okay, so for CMR, I think we do a lot of CMR. We do a lot of CMR because if you even want to follow up these patients or prognosticate these patients, you want to have an ejection fraction which is numbered. You want to have exactly what is the extent of edema. You want to have exactly what is the size of the scar. So all these, for any follow-up of these patients, it's very important. We've also seen a lot of them post-COVID. There's been a lot of patients post-COVID who are coming with just myocardial edema, and that would not be picked up in any other modality. So very important for tissue characterization, and that is the reason why we do a lot of CMR, even in patients who come with arrhythmias, because you want to check what's happening. As far as calcium score is concerned, see, the thing is that at this point, if calcium score is a great tool, and it's now in the guidelines for lipids, the thing is that calcium score only comes up after the age of 50, usually. I mean, unless somebody has a tremendous amount of plaques, you only see it after the age of 50. So if the calcium score is 0, although it gives you a certain amount of complacency, but amongst the youngsters, I'm now seeing even patients 28 to 32 who are coming with severe coronary artery disease. And these are patients who had family histories. If we talk about breast cancer or any other cancer or colonic cancer, we say that if a family had it, then we start looking at the girls 10 years before, or we start looking at, we start evaluating the same patient's family about 10 or a decade or 15 years before the person who had it. Now, in coronary artery disease, unfortunately, we're still leaving it to 50 to start evaluating these patients. We should be, and we should not depend only on lipids and giving statins. We should be truly looking at these patients much earlier with a coronary CT, especially if they have a family history of triple vessel disease at an early age or something, because it's very important to pick up the plaque at its first step. If we leave it for later, then we've lost the plot. So I feel that I think we need to do the coronary CT earlier amongst people who are at high risk. If patients are not at high risk, then again we can stick to the calcium score. But one important thing that everybody should realize is that anybody who's having statins is going to have a calcium score that will keep increasing, because the intent of the statin is to stabilize the plaque and calcify it. So anybody who's on statins, unfortunately, they'll come the first year, they'll say, now my lipids are okay, why is my calcium going up? But that's because that was the whole intention, that if there is any plaque, it will stabilize the plaque. So it's important to understand that, a calcium score recurrently done doesn't have any value, because if there was calcium in the first step, then the second step, it will be increased. And it's not because the coronary artery disease increased, but also because we stabilize the plaque.
Dr. Mona, what is the best tool for follow-up of patients with amyloidosis treated with drugs like tafamidis? What is
I
the
think
best
CMR
tool?
is the best.
Hmm?
CMR is the best because you'll see values changing, and that's really important. So if you can get multiparametric imaging and you can get T1, T2 values and ECV, then that's the best way to follow up these patients. Because then you have a number. What CMR was initially missing was like the Hounsfield number of CT, where you could put a number and say, okay, today it's 100, tomorrow it's 80, third day it's 60. So that is what you're looking for. You wanted that. You also wanted to be able to evaluate these patients much earlier, before the disease has actually set in. So it's multi-parametric MR will be the most useful way to prognosticate these patients and follow up patients.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mona Bhatia.